Hello, it's so good to have you with us here at Leadership for Sustainability. This is the podcast where we help you lead on sustainability to deliver results and make a real difference in the world. I'm Osbert Lancaster, longtime sustainability consultant and trainer, and co-founder of Realise Earth. My guest in this episode is Adam Liddle, recently appointed Head of Sustainability with RoslinCT. Adam has some great insights to share, both from his previous role with the global technical services consultancy Jacobs and from his experience of starting as the first head of sustainability with a medium-sized enterprise in the life sciences industry. Adam, great to have you with us on the show today. Could we kick off by maybe tell us a little bit about what RoslinCT does?
Absolutely will do. So RoslinCT, the CT stands for cell therapy. So RoslinCT is a spin out from the Roslin Institute. The company was spun out in way back in 2006 and took all the kind of scientific excellence that was within the Roslin Institute that led to the cloning of Dolly the sheep, and is now translating that to producing advanced therapies for metabolic diseases around solid tumors, blood cancers, degenerative diseases. And RoslinCT acts as what is called a CDMO, which is a contract development and manufacturing organization. So we are essentially a very highly skilled specialist manufacturing service provider for advanced cell therapy, gene therapy treatments for all those ranges of diseases. So we would typically be part of larger companies' value chain to provide those really specialist services. And we have in Edinburgh, based at BioQuarter. And we've recently acquired and integrated with a business in the US called Lycan Biosciences, but it's now, as of Monday this week, all known as RoslinCT, based just outside of Boston in the US. So we are on a very kind of rapid high growth journey and transatlantic operations to provide really kind of niche specialist scientific services.
Oh, I'm so glad. That's been so helpful because I was like looking through the website thinking, this is obviously, I'm not the intended audience here. I think I sort of got to where you just explained it, but I couldn't explain it to anyone else.
And that was what that's what I was like about 2 months ago. I've very recently joined RoslinCT as head of sustainability. So it's a new role for the organization. I've come in essentially to set up a sustainability strategy, sustainability plan for RoslinCT as a small company. And my previous experience, I was 10 years working at a company called Jacobs, which is a large global professional technical services consultancy, tens of thousands of employees around the world. And I've taken that experience and applying that to a completely new industry for me in cell therapy in the life sciences sector. So it's a very exciting challenge.
Quite some journey. Yeah.
It is.
So
yes.
Thinking about, I'd helped Edinburgh University develop their sustainability strategy and speaking to a lot of people in the medical faculty around that, all that. It was like, well, we do health. That's a good thing anyway. Mm-hmm. We don't need to do sustainability as well. How do you see your role around sustainability at Roslin evolving? Where does sustainability fit into all that, apart from, well, health is a good thing to do?
Well, health and medicines absolutely is a really good thing to do, and developing these innovative treatments that will fundamentally save lives and cure patients of really quite horrible diseases is a sustainability that is part of, when we talk about sustainability in the broader sense, in terms of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, health and well-being and access to medicines is absolutely part of it. Where it becomes a bit broader than that for a business in that sector is the things that you would typically expect to see from a sustainability strategy. So looking at on the environmental side of things, a lot of the manufacturing obviously is done in, high grade clean room manufacturing environments where cleanliness and use of products and packaging and materials and waste generation can be quite high. Essential reasons to maintain patient safety, drug safety, all of that sort of things. Trying to understand where the company's greenhouse gas emissions come from. So that's the same as any business. The fuels that you use, the energy that you consume through your office and your lab and your manufacturing equipment, the electricity that you purchase that is used to heat and power offices and labs, and how we travel around and do our jobs and buy the equipment and the materials that we need to. That's a priority on the environmental side is mitigating our own impact on climate change. And firstly, looking at baselining that, and then starting to kind of understand, well, where can we make small changes to reduce that? Where can we reduce our material consumption? Where can we very easily switch to renewable forms of energy rather than fossil fuel-based power consumption? How can we do things with less travel or using more sustainable modes of travel? Things like that. Understanding how climate change can impact our business. So understanding the risks that climate change will pose to us as a business, how climate change might interrupt crucial supply chains in the future, provision of materials, for example. That level of understanding is crucial on the environmental side of sustainability for Roslin. And then when we kind of talk about the social side of things, it's the outcomes, the impact, the purpose, the actual treatments and medicines, and the accessibility, the affordability that we're talking about is where Roslin can have a huge impact on global populations. And around certainly engaging our people in terms of, supporting kind of diversity, inclusion, and equity policies internally at our business, investing in our people, kind of creating equal opportunities, economic development opportunities, engaging with the local community to educate people around the scientific opportunities that exist within the city of Edinburgh. All of that good stuff around kind of delivering social value. So it can be very, very, very broad. Once you start thinking about it, all of these themes are relevant to any business in any sector. The challenge is taking big, global, lofty themes and going through a materiality process and narrowing it down to tangible action items that are measurable and where we can report on them.
I think I might guess what the answer is, but maybe I'm wrong. But my next question is, what's got you excited or fired up about sustainability most recently?
Yeah, it's doing exactly that. It's taking big global themes around health and well-being, water, sanitation, clean energy, climate change, and helping businesses understand what their role is in contributing towards, in small part, in contributing towards global goals around climate change and sustainability, and taking the company through a journey to understand, well, what can we focus on? What's our contribution to the world? Where can we have a positive impact? It's that stage of things where you can really kind of marry up strategic thinking with practical problem solving to address sustainability issues. That's the really exciting bit. And once you've done that, then it's hard work, forming project teams, creating initiatives, developing KPIs, reporting and delivery, which is equally exciting. Seeing progress over, a number of years that starts from a bit of a strategic thinking exercise. Seeing businesses embrace the change is fantastically exciting.
So we were talking a little bit before we turned the record on about sort of the importance of getting colleagues and senior management, other stakeholders involved with sustainability. Is there a particular moment or a particular project or sort of particular thing that was going on in your career you'd really like to share around a success story around engaging people with sustainability?
Yeah, I mean, there's things that help to engage people across a business, regardless of how large or small it is. And often find that storytelling and using examples that are relatable across different industries, different professions, is a very impactful way of.
So can I throw that back at you then?
Yeah, please.
So tell me a story about when you did that.
Yeah,
in your
I will
career.
So it's in my previous role. We created an internal sustainability awards scheme, and this was really to incentivize and recognize sustainable behaviors. And we had one session where we were talking about sustainability to a group of engineers in one office, and there was a group of piping engineers, and one of them spoke up and was quite vocal and said, "Well, that's all very well and good, but I don't really see how it relates to me." And so when one of my colleagues at the time had a conversation with me about, well, let's just talk through what you do on a day-to-day basis and the practices that you put in place since you've been working on this large site, which is a large nuclear site. In the end, it transpired that he'd put in place practices to change the welding practices around piping infrastructure on that particular site, which resulted in reduced hours working in a high hazard area, reduced energy consumption, reduced laundry bills and laundry cleaning of PPE because it didn't need to be cleaned for so long, reduced traveling to and from site, which reduced carbon emissions and fuel consumption. And all of these different kind of he didn't quite connect to just a simple change to a welding practice on site. And so that's a very, very kind of easy fix to put in through kind of standard kind of engineering or manufacturing process. And, and the same can be said of any industry. If you think about what you do and how you use it and the impact it has, you can put simple changes in place that will have multiple benefits. And it's just having that conversation that can help realize it. And as a result of that conversation, that chap won the award that quarter.
It's going back to the the establishment of that award scheme. Where did that come from? Where did the energy and ideas for that come from, and how was it sort of developed and rolled out?
Yeah, I mean, it was quite straightforward, actually. I mean, it was devised by our team at the time. We put some kind of rough criteria around it. It must lead to tangible outcomes. It must link to one or more UN Sustainable Development Goals. It must be applied in an office or a project or manufacturing environment. And there was a certain number of criteria, and we just launched it, and people embraced it. And every quarter we would love to see the submissions coming in, walk through, judging them, and just thinking about, oh my God, yeah, so this is how this person has interpreted sustainability and applied it to their role. And it could be in a lab environment, it could be in an on-site construction environment, it could be inside in a kind of community engagement environment, it could be at the home, just in the office, for example. And so all these various different applications of sustainability that we would then use to showcase how it can be applied to inspire and educate and engage people broader across the business. And it was a very simple thing to introduce.
Mm. Yeah, one of the things around, I think sustainability is it's a weird word. I mean, lots of us working in the sector sort of think we know what sustainability means. We assume people know what it means. I mean, speaking to someone who's not into sustainability,
Yes.
and they're like, I don't do sustainability. I don't get it. I don't understand. No relevance to me. I've had this speaking to it was a law professor about sustainability. They said, no, we don't do sustainability in this department. And it's like, so what do you research? And she was like, I research citizenship in the European Union and how citizens influence, the policies and stuff. It's like, it sounds a bit like sustainability. I mean, that's part of sustainability. There's something about helping people make the connections between things that they think are just like, well, this is what I do to the Sustainable Development Goals. And is that, do you see that sort of barrier?
Absolutely. So in the first few weeks of my position at RoslinCT, it's typically been researching around the industry, looking at what the company does, benchmarking other companies within the industry, looking at kind of priorities around healthcare, access to medicines, what the life sciences industry can or should be focusing on. And then when you start to get into kind of developing that into tangible actions, then you suddenly think, well, how am I going to deliver that? And so part of that is it draws upon what our HSE team are already working on. Part of that brings in our supply chain team. When we're talking about, example, is scope 3 emissions, supply chain emissions, then you rely very, very heavily on your supply chain logistics department, supply quality management. And so the more you look into it, the more you realize that it's actually integrated throughout the whole organic structure of the company. And you rely on teamwork and collaboration and everybody coming together. And until you kind of break it down into actionable items, it's disjointed. It is kind of spread out through the organization without anybody actually quite realizing, oh, this is part of sustainability. What's needed is something to bring it together into a sustainability plan and frame it around something like the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So yes, absolutely, that resonates very well.
So maybe it's, you said you're only 2 months in, I think, to the role, and maybe this is too early, and maybe you don't want to say this in public. But to what extent have you found, like, people are sort of welcoming this you coming in, this new, the new guy coming in and asking all these stupid questions and saying, or is it like, oh, great, at last we're doing this, or is it, that's like, leave me to get on with my job? I mean, where is it?
It's very much the kind of welcoming, something that people have been thinking about, but they might not have thought of it in quite as broad a sense as, the UN Sustainable Development Goals, thinking about the entire breadth of environmental, the social, the governance aspects, goals, particularly around gender or inequalities or good governance, for example. People wouldn't typically, unless they work in that world, they wouldn't typically make the connection between sustainability and that. The tendency, the natural tendency is to go immediately towards the environmental side around waste and
We do
environmental
recycling.
pollution.
That's
Absolutely, yeah. And that's the immediate connection that people make, which absolutely is relevant, but it's much broader than that. And suddenly you start to have these conversations around, well, this is the breadth of what it covers. It's much broader, and we're probably doing a whole range of things that fall under this umbrella already. What we need to do is kind of come together and collaborate and bring that together into one sustainability plan.
one of the things I've seen with, particularly with organizations that have got a sort of a clear public benefit type role, like working in health.
Yeah.
There's sometimes been a sense of, well, we're already doing good stuff. This is what we do. This is our core purpose. And telling us to reduce carbon and stuff while we're saving the world from whatever diseases it is like, that's a distraction. You're stopping us doing what we need to do.
Yeah.
Is there any tension around those sort of things at the moment with you? Or
Not yet.
oh, great, good. Maybe the world's moved on. Maybe because that was a few years ago. Sort of the example I'm thinking of there.
No, absolutely not. And I think this is part of running a good business now. We're talking about long-term value creation, financial and non-financial, long-term enterprise value creation that contributes towards protecting the planet, protecting people, good governance, running a business the right way so business can be enforced. And that creates, positive working environment. It creates positive business value, and it shows that we care about these things, which I certainly do. I hope through the first kind of 2 months in the role that's come through with my colleagues and the people that I've spoken to about sustainability. You can tell that people want to do this and they want to make a change because it's a good thing to do and it will result in good things that will only benefit the company.
So one of the things I come across a lot is senior managers or owner managers, directors saying, "Well, yeah, we want to do something around climate, around sustainability.
Mm.
We don't know where to start."
Mhm.
And I guess RoslinCT have made a start by appointing you.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
When you were doing your introduction, you talked about a whole, all the range of stuff that needs to be tackled.
Yeah.
Within all of that, well, you can, in some ways, it's relatively easy to start asking the questions, finding out all the potential things to do. How are you sort of narrowing that down and say, okay, here are the things we need to work on first? How do you turn all that stuff into the start of an action plan, perhaps, or some priorities?
Yeah. I mean, so that's the tricky part is where do you start? And the challenge is everything that needs to be implemented or that should be implemented to start with, have to bear in mind that we're starting from not quite a blank sheet of paper, because there are things in the business that already exist, albeit not framed explicitly as sustainability. But let's, for the argument's sake, we're starting from a blank sheet of paper. Everything needs to be proportionate. So we can't go too big and say, right, we're going to start TCFD reporting. We're going to start, we're going to set a science-based target within 6 weeks. We can't be that ambitious. But what we can do is understand, well, what's our impact? Where do we kind of consume materials? Where do we consume energy? And what can we do to what are the first steps that we can put in place to minimize our impact and start kind of reducing? So we could look at things like, just how we can manage waste from our offices and from our lab. We could look at our suppliers in terms of packaging that is provided when we procure materials and gets managed through our manufacturing procedures. We could look at, how easy is it to shift to renewable energy tariffs across our estates? I think things like that are relatively straightforward to put in place. Could we, internally, could we kind of start changing the culture by establishing an informal network of sustainability champions? So just employees that care about this stuff and want to get involved in their free time, in the lunch hour, or, like half an hour a week to just promote kind of sustainable behaviors in the workplace. Changing the consumables, the supply of consumables that we use in the workplace through to, milk, for example. What type of milk packaging do we use? Where do we get our coffee from, for example? Tiny, little changes like that all contribute and add up and start to kind of influence the culture at a business. And then we can start to look at, right, we've got a foundation in place. How do we build up from that? How do we kind of scale up and and make the ambition a bit kind of higher.
Yeah, and that's something I've experienced sometimes is that employees who are already interested and knowledgeable
Mm.
sometimes getting really quite frustrated by doing some of the easy stuff and saying, well, let's look at, how are we getting fair trade coffee? Are we getting organic
Yeah.
milk? It's like, well, come on, yeah, it's
Yeah.
important, but it's like, it's not a priority. We've got a world to save here.
Yeah.
But is that a tension you're seeing, or is that?
No, not really. It's a balance, isn't it? So you kind of have to do the little changes to kind of introduce that culture change and make that culture shift. So when it comes to kind of taking people along on a journey, you have to do the little things that are visible in the office to evoke that mindset shift, as well as kind of leading on what's, like when we're talking about corporate disclosures and big kind of corporate requirements that need to be discussed amongst a senior leadership team and with the board of directors. You need to marry that up with doing
Yeah.
the kind of the tangible kind of visible changes around office waste and things that we talked about around consumables. Everything's achievable. It's just certain things can be put in place a lot quicker than others.
Yes, of course. I guess the key thing there, is that as well as those tangible, not necessarily easy things, but tangible sort of immediate things,
Yeah.
I think there needs to be a sense that people recognize these bigger questions, these bigger issues
Yeah.
are being tackled, they are being
Yeah.
addressed by senior management. And
Abs-
this isn't, which I have seen sometimes, it's like senior management, go and do the
abs-
environmental stuff. And it's like, that's us ticking the box.
No, absolutely, and you have to be aware of what's coming down the track. So if you're developing a sustainability strategy, you have to think about, well, where's the company realistically going to be in 2 or 3 years' time? Now, so a company like Roslin is on a high growth journey in Edinburgh and the US. It will likely expand in those geographies over the next kind of 2, 3, 5 years. So you're going to have one eye on what's coming. At the moment, we are an SME. Next year, we won't be, which then kind of tips us over into another type of reporting category. So having one eye on what are the kind of corporate reporting mandatory disclosures that will impact a business like RoslinCT in 2, 3, 5 years' time, need to have an eye on that and prepare ourselves to be in a good place to respond to those requirements when appropriate for our business.
Absolutely. So given a whole range of stuff you've got to pick up and do, and both the short term, what's coming up down the line at you. I know I asked you about priorities, but I'm more thinking here about, is it a mindset shift? If there was sort of one thing that you really wanted to unlock,
Yeah.
a sort of shift of pace, a shift of mindset, if you could tweak that one thing or shift what would it be?
It's a good question, because I would really like to get to a point where sustainability is part of the culture at RoslinCT. And from what I've seen already, I don't think it's that far away, because a lot of people when I first started in the role and my position was announced, a lot of people just got in touch of their own back and just said, I've got some ideas about this, and this. So you can, based on that, there's a willingness there, and it's on people's minds. And there's almost a sense of relief that someone's been appointed to take care of all of these things. And so I would like to get to a point where it's part of the culture and people think in a sustainable way whenever they're procuring something, whenever we are using something, whenever we are kind of traveling around, whenever we're attending conferences or getting out there and meeting with clients, meeting with suppliers, promoting what we do. It then becomes part of how we think about how we conduct our business. And it becomes part of discussions at the C-suites all the way down through the organization.
And do you see that sort of shift in culture? Do you see that? Is that something that will sort of emerge as you and your colleagues and the collaborators and whatever go about doing this stuff? Or does there need to be some sort of specific attention given to the culture building as well as to the processes and practices
I
stuff?
think it's a bit of both. I think if you apply a bit of attention to evoking a culture change and you put little things in place to provide employees with a platform and an easy way to engage or communicate around sustainability, then that will kind of unlock opportunities for employees to engage. If you don't do that, the tendency is that, I've got this idea, but I don't know what to do about it. If you provide a kind of a safe space, a forum, a platform, mechanisms around the business for people to do that easily, and you create little things to kind of help people engage, then it unlocks those opportunities, and people will say, "Oh, I've got an idea, and I know where to go, and I know who to speak to about this." And that it all kind of helps to kind of unlock and hopefully will create a wave that kind of builds over time. And that's kind of where we're at is the start of that journey at the moment.
Yeah. So it sounds a little bit there like you were talking about sort of this was about engaging rank and file or whatever you want to
Yeah. Yeah.
call it, which is great.
Mm.
Where does middle management sit in this? Because quite often you see like senior management get it like all ahead, go ahead, sort of rank and file, like, yeah, we're up for it.
Mm.
And I've seen some really unfortunate cases of
Yeah.
businesses, rank and file are ready to do this. They've come up with suggestions. They've got green champions, and middle
Yeah.
management are basically blocking it because, like, they're just being squashed from
The
the
pressure.
top. They've got targets to deliver.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean,
And
do you see that as being an issue? And
I mean, it may be.
well,
I haven't seen it yet.
yeah, but
Because I'm
how
not.
would you avoid? How do you avoid it being an issue? Perhaps is a politer way of putting it.
Yeah,
Where-
probably a better question. Yeah, and I think that's up to me to understand what their pressures are on a day-to-day
Yeah.
basis. Obviously, working in that we work under what's called GMP regulations, good manufacturing practices regulations to manufacture safe drugs, and that is there's a lot of protocol around that. People have to work that cannot be sacrificed at all, and that kind of that's priority. That takes up the resource, and that is what the heads of department, the managers within departments are thinking about. And so my job is to understand what those pressures are and understand, well, how can we kind of fit sustainability amongst that? How can we kind of bleed this in so it doesn't distract from your day job? It doesn't interfere, but it complements what you do. And it might even make your life easier a bit. So one thing I've done is just a part of the governance structure is set up kind of, a regular kind of working group with management from across the business representing the different departments. So they all have visibility over what we can do around sustainability. They all have the opportunity to contribute in terms of how their departments will be impacted, or whether they've got some thoughts on how we can deliver a certain initiative, what KPIs we should use. They might have an idea of something that I've not thought about at all through the manufacturing development, the research operations, projects that we run with clients. There could be things I don't know the business. It's those people that know the business, and I'm here to just bring it all together and create a plan. But like I said before, I cannot do that in isolation. It's a collaborative working environment. And so it's part of just kind of breaking down those barriers, establishing a kind of close working relationships with middle management, understanding their pressures, understanding where we can support one another, and then we can kind of help kind of things off the ground and bring others with us to help deliver.
that sounds like really, really useful advice for people coming into a role like yours for the first time.
Well, we'll wait and see.
Well, it's a good starting point. But
Hopefully it'll
what
work.
would you? I guess I sort of. What might that look like in practice? How did you start doing that stuff?
Yeah, so I mean, one of the first things that I did was pull together a presentation on what is sustainability. I start at the very start, and don't assume people know what your job entails. Don't assume people know what sustainability is. Just go right back to the very start. So I pulled together a presentation that I delivered to C-suite and management across the organization, and just around what is sustainability at the broadest sense. What's the difference between sustainability and ESG? Because you will probably have all heard these terms, but what's the difference? How does that then relate to the life sciences industry in a kind of material sense? What are the material issues that impact our industry? And what's the process that we go through to understand how these big global issues relate to our business within our sector? And then out of that process falls a plan. And out of that plan falls action items. And who is it that is required to deliver those action items? It's not me. It's not just me. It's me plus all of these other departments and stakeholders from across the business. And it's getting that message across that we start big, provide a little bit of education around what it is and why it's important to our business. And here's what it might look like for a company in our industry. And typically, I need the help. We all need to work together to help deliver this, which will result in positive things for the business.
So this might be a segue, might not be. But so what book or article or video might you recommend to other people leading on sustainability?
Well, when it comes to sustainability, and we talked about leadership at the start,
Yeah.
it almost doesn't matter what the subject is that you're leading in. It's the leadership experience and capabilities that you want to develop. So the technical part of it, you can almost forget. If you're in a hopefully if you're in a position like this, you've got the technical background, the technical understanding. The challenge now is to make sure you can lead across and horizontally across a business. And so when I mentioned that I was moving from Jacobs across to Roslin, I was speaking to one of my friends in Portobello, and he gave me this book called The First 90 Days. And I read it before I started, and it just gave me some useful tips on how to kind of approach the first 3 months in a role. So, and especially when it's promoted role and into a new industry as well, in terms of just engaging, providing that kind of broad level education. Don't come in as though you think you know it all and you're going to change the company overnight, because that's absolutely the wrong way to approach it. And so I would say that if people haven't read that and they're at this point in their careers where they're going through a change, and it could be internally within the same company, or they just want to kind of read a kind of leadership book. Yeah, it's called The First 90 Days. And I would recommend that. That was quite helpful for me starting in the role.
Excellent. I've heard of it, but I'll look it out and put it in the show notes.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Well, Adam, it's been an absolute pleasure having this conversation.
Likewise.
And yeah, hearing about your first 60 days, I guess it is so far. So thank you so much for coming on the show, and look forward to seeing what happens at RoslinCT next.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Keep everyone posted.
So many great insights there from Adam. I'm looking forward to discussing these and picking out some of the most important and useful ideas and approaches with my colleagues in a future episode very soon. If you think people in your networks will find this episode interesting, please let them know about it by sharing it on LinkedIn, via email, or even old-fashioned word of mouth. You'll find the show notes for this episode at realize.earth/115. I'm Osbert Lancaster, and I hope this episode of Leadership for Sustainability will help you lead on sustainability in your organization. What you're doing is so important, now more than ever. Be sure to look after yourself. Bye for now.